"I'll provide whatever support you'll accept," he said. "But Madison, this isn't about money for me. I want to be her father, not just her financial backing." Madison nodded slowly. "I appreciate that, but we should formalize the support aspect at least. For Eliza's security. Of course, I'll have my lawyers draft something for your review." He hesitated, then added, "There's something else I'd like to propose." Madison tensed slightly, waiting. "The Westmoreland renovation project. Your design vision combined with my company's resources and connections could make it extraordinary." He leaned forward, excitement evident in his voice. "A true collaboration, Madison. Equal partners." The unexpected business proposition caught her off guard. "You want to work together professionally? Now? Why not? You've proven your firm's capabilities by winning the bid over mine. And frankly, your design concept for the historic elements was superior to what my team developed." The admission of her professional advantage seemed to come easily to him now. "Think of what we could create if we combined our strengths instead of competing." Madison studied him, trying to discern any hidden agenda in the proposition. "The last time we worked together on anything, it didn't end well, Nathaniel." "We're different people now," he countered. "You're not the woman whose talents I dismissed, and I'm trying very hard not to be the man who did the dismissing." The proposal was tempting from a purely business perspective. Kingston Developments had resources and connections that would take Madison years to build independently. The Westmoreland project could become a showcase that would elevate Madison Reed design to national prominence. But mixing their professional and personal lives again, especially with Eliza now in the equation, "I need to think about it," she said finally. "The business proposition and everything else." Nathaniel nodded, accepting her caution without the impatience he would have shown in the past. "Take whatever time you need. I'm not going anywhere, Madison. Not this time." As he rose to leave, Madison walked him to the door, both of them aware of the seismic shift that had occurred in their relationship over the course of a single day. They were no longer simply ex-spouses with painful history between them. They were parents, bound by a connection that would last a lifetime. At the door, Nathaniel turned to her, his expression serious. "I know I don't deserve your trust yet, but I'm going to earn it, Madison. For Eliza's sake and maybe for ours too." Before she could respond, he was gone, leaving Madison standing in her doorway, watching his tall figure disappear into the gathering dusk, wondering if the man who had just left was truly different from the one who had broken her heart, or if she was setting herself up for another devastating fall. The weeks that followed established a tentative new pattern in Madison's life. Nathaniel began with short, supervised visits to see Eliza. An hour in the evening after work, weekend mornings when the baby was most alert and engaged. Each time, he arrived precisely when promised, never canceling despite his demanding schedule, treating these appointments with his daughter as non-negotiable priorities. Madison watched his interaction with Eliza evolve from nervous awkwardness to growing confidence. He researched infant development obsessively, sharing articles and studies with Madison about everything from sleep patterns to cognitive stimulation. When Eliza smiled for the first time, a real, responsive smile rather than a reflex, Nathaniel happened to be holding her. The look of absolute wonder on his face had pierced something in Madison's carefully guarded heart. 2 weeks after his discovery of Eliza, Nathaniel presented Madison with legal documents establishing a generous trust for their daughter's future, along with child support arrangements that exceeded anything she would have requested. The papers came with no strings attached, no demands for specific custody or control, just the simple statement that regardless of how their co-parenting relationship evolved, Eliza's financial security was assured. Madison had signed the documents with mixed emotions. The security for Eliza was a relief, but she couldn't help remembering how money had always been Nathaniel's preferred solution to problems, emotional and otherwise, during their marriage. "Money isn't the only thing she'll need from you," Madison had said as she returned the signed papers. "I know," Nathaniel had replied, surprising her again with his self-awareness. "It's just the easiest thing for me to give right now. The rest, I'm working on it." And he was, in ways Madison couldn't deny. He'd begun seeing a therapist, something he'd dismissed as weakness for people who can't solve their own problems during their marriage. He mentioned it casually one evening as he prepared to leave after putting Eliza down for the night. Dr. Brennan thinks my drive for control stems from the helplessness I felt watching Sophia's illness, he'd said, shrugging into his coat. Apparently I've been trying to control everything in my life to compensate for the one thing I couldn't change. Madison had been momentarily speechless at this casual revelation of insight. The Nathaniel she'd been married to would never have admitted to psychological vulnerability, let alone shared a therapist's assessment of his behavior. That makes sense, she'd managed finally. He'd smiled ruefully. Doesn't excuse what I did to you, though. How I treated you during our marriage. No, Madison had agreed quietly. It doesn't. But understanding is a start. As for the Westmoreland project collaboration he'd proposed, Madison had eventually agreed, with carefully negotiated terms that protected her firm's creative autonomy and ensured equal credit for the design elements. Their first professional meeting had been awkward, both hyper-aware of maintaining appropriate boundaries in front of their respective teams. But as the project developed, Madison found herself grudgingly impressed by how Nathaniel had changed his professional approach. He listened more than he spoke in creative sessions, asked questions rather than issuing directives, and publicly credited Madison's insights in ways that elevated her standing with contractors and clients alike. You're different in meetings, she observed one evening after a particularly successful presentation to the Historical Preservation Board. Less domineering, arrogant, controlling, he supplied with surprising self-deprecation. I was going to say intense, she finished, smiling despite herself. But those work too. Nathaniel laughed, a sound that had once been rare but was becoming more frequent. Heart surgery has a way of adjusting your perspective on what battles are worth fighting. The casual reference to his health condition, something he'd hidden from business associates and rivals for months, reminded Madison how significantly their relationship had shifted. There was a growing honesty between them, a tentative trust being rebuilt on new foundations. As Christmas approached, bringing with it Eliza's 2-month milestone, the question of holiday arrangements became unavoidable. Madison had always spent Christmas Eve and morning with her sister Olivia's family, a tradition she wasn't willing to sacrifice, especially for Eliza's first Christmas. I'd like Eliza to experience Christmas morning at Olivia's, she told Nathaniel during one of his evening visits. Her cousins are so excited to have a baby in the family this year. She braced herself for an argument, for Nathaniel to insist on equal holiday time or to propose some extravagant alternative. Instead, he nodded thoughtfully. Family traditions are important, he agreed. What if I come for Christmas dinner? I could bring dessert. The simple suggestion, so reasonable, so unlike the man who had once insisted on controlling every holiday detail, caught Madison off guard. You want to have Christmas dinner with my family? She clarified. With Olivia, who still looks at you like she's plotting your demise. Nathaniel winced. Your sister's protective instincts are well-founded. But yes, if they'll have me. Eliza should have her father present for her first Christmas. And I don't have other plans. The admission of loneliness, however indirect, stirred something unexpected in Madison's chest. She'd been so focused on protecting herself and Eliza from Nathaniel's potential negative influence that she hadn't considered what these holidays might mean to a man whose only family was now a newborn daughter and an ex-wife who kept him at careful arm's length. I'll talk to Olivia, she promised. But fair warning, her husband Marcus makes the world's most competitive gingerbread houses, and he expects everyone to participate. Nathaniel's smile had been genuine. I accept the challenge. When Christmas Day arrived, bringing with it a rare Atlanta snowfall that transformed the city into a winter wonderland, Madison found herself watching Nathaniel with a perspective she hadn't anticipated. He arrived at Olivia's suburban home bearing not just the promised dessert, an elegant bûche de Noël from the city's finest bakery, but also thoughtfully chosen gifts for Madison's nieces and nephew, and a peace offering of expensive scotch for Marcus. Olivia had greeted him with cool politeness, accepting the lavish dessert with a raised eyebrow but no outright hostility. Her husband Marcus, less burdened by history, had been more welcoming, especially after examining the label on the Scotch bottle. Single malt, aged 18 years, he'd observed, impressed despite himself. You did your homework, Kingston. Madison mentioned you were a connoisseur. Nathaniel had replied, the casual reference to conversations with Madison revealing how their communications had extended beyond mere co-parenting logistics. Throughout the day, Madison found herself watching Nathaniel navigate her family dynamics with unexpected grace. He answered Olivia's pointed questions about his intentions with patient honesty rather than defensive deflection. He got down on the floor to help Madison's 7-year-old nephew construct a complicated Lego set. He held Eliza with increasing confidence, narrating the holiday festivities to her as if the 2-month-old understood every word. Most surprising was how he handled the infamous gingerbread house competition. Rather than approaching it with the competitive intensity that characterized his business dealings, Nathaniel deferred to Madison's 10-year-old niece Charlotte, who had appointed herself his design partner. We need more pink frosting, Charlotte had declared, directing Nathaniel with the absolute authority only children possess. And those silver ball things for the roof. Yes, ma'am. Nathaniel had responded with mock seriousness, executing her vision without imposing his own perfectionist standards. When their lopsided creation with its excessive pink frosting and precarious candy cane columns was declared the winner by Charlotte's unilateral decision, Nathaniel had celebrated as if they'd secured a billion-dollar contract, lifting the delighted girl onto his shoulders for a victory lap around the dining room. Watching him, Madison felt something shift in her perception. This wasn't the calculated charm he'd sometimes displayed during their marriage when it served his purposes. This was genuine connection, joy in the moment, pleasure in simple family traditions. Later, as evening settled over the snow-covered neighborhood and the children dozed in front of a holiday movie, Madison found herself alone with Nathaniel in Olivia's kitchen, helping him wash dishes while the rest of the adults played cards in the dining room. Thank you for including me today, he said quietly, accepting a plate from her to dry. It means more than you know. You've been good with everyone, Madison acknowledged. Even Olivia seems to be thawing slightly. High praise indeed. Nathaniel smiled, then grew serious. My Christmases growing up weren't like this. Not after Sophia died. My father worked through most holidays. My mother went through the motions, but the joy was gone. He placed a dried glass carefully in the cabinet. I want better for Eliza. I want her to have this. Family, traditions, people who show up. The simple honesty of his statement touched Madison deeply. It revealed a yearning for connection, for meaning beyond material success, that she'd never fully recognized in him during their marriage. People who show up, she repeated softly. That's what you've been doing these past months, isn't it? Showing up consistently for Eliza. For me, in a way. Nathaniel met her eyes, something vulnerable in his gaze. I'm trying to be the man I should have been years ago, the man you deserved then, the father Eliza deserves now. The moments stretched between them, charged with unspoken possibilities. Madison became acutely aware of their proximity in the small kitchen, of how familiar yet different he seemed after these months of cautious reconnection. The spell was broken by Eliza's cry from the living room, where she'd been sleeping in her portable bassinet. Madison moved to respond, but Nathaniel touched her arm gently. Let me, he said. You've been handling everything all day. Finish your coffee while it's still warm. He left before she could protest, returning moments later with a fussing Eliza expertly cradled against his shoulder, patting her back with the practiced rhythm he'd developed over weeks of learning her preferences. I think she's just overtired, he murmured, swaying slightly in the soothing motion that often calmed their daughter. Too much excitement for one day. Madison watched as Eliza's cries subsided, her tiny head nestling into the crook of Nathaniel's neck as she drifted back to sleep. The trust between father and daughter was palpable, built through consistent presence and genuine care over these past months. We should probably head home soon, Madison said, glancing out at the snow that had begun falling again. The roads will get worse after dark. Nathaniel nodded, still swaying gently with Eliza. I had my driver bring the SUV with winter tires. Let me take you both home. Safer than you driving in this. 6 months ago, Madison would have interpreted the offer as Nathaniel's need to control the situation, to demonstrate his superior resources. Now, watching him cradle their sleeping daughter with such natural tenderness, she recognized it for what it was, genuine concern for their safety. "All right," she agreed, surprising both of them. "That would be helpful. Thank you." The drive back to Madison's home through snow-drifted streets was peaceful. Eliza securely fastened in her car seat between them in the spacious back seat of Nathaniel's luxury SUV. Christmas lights glowed from decorated homes, transforming Atlanta's historic neighborhoods into fairylands of color against the white landscape. "I've been thinking," Nathaniel said as they turned onto Madison Street, his voice carefully neutral, "about more permanent arrangements for my time with Eliza." Madison tensed slightly. Here it came, the custody discussion she'd been anticipating and dreading. "I'd like to convert the guest wing of my house into a proper nursery," he continued, "for when she's old enough to stay with me occasionally. Nothing overnight until you're comfortable with it, of course. But eventually." "You want shared custody?" Madison stated, the words feeling heavy in her mouth. "I want what's best for Eliza," Nathaniel corrected gently. "Which I believe includes having both parents fully involved in her life, yes." "But Madison," he turned to face her as the car stopped in her driveway, "this isn't about legal rights or controlling access. It's about giving our daughter the most stable, loving environment we can create for her." Madison looked down at Eliza, sleeping peacefully between them, unaware of the complex adult negotiations surrounding her future. "And what does that look like to you?" "Practically speaking, I don't have a fixed blueprint," Nathaniel admitted, another departure from his usual approach of presenting fully formed plans. "I think we create it together, based on what works for all three of us. Starting small, building as Eliza grows and as," he hesitated, "as our trust grows." Our trust. The simple phrase acknowledged the fragility of what they were rebuilding, the care required to move forward. "I'll think about it," Madison promised as the driver opened her door, letting in a swirl of snowflakes. "We can discuss details after the holidays." Nathaniel helped gather Eliza's diaper bag and carrier, following Madison to her front door through the accumulating snow. Once inside, he carefully transferred the still sleeping baby to her crib, while Madison turned on lights and adjusted the thermostat. "Thank you again for today," he said as he prepared to leave. "For letting me be part of Eliza's first Christmas." Madison nodded, suddenly aware of how much had changed since that stormy confrontation in Eliza's nursery just weeks ago. How the man standing before her both was and wasn't the husband she'd divorced 3 years earlier. "Nathaniel," she said impulsively as he reached for the door handle, "would you like to come for New Year's Eve? Nothing fancy. Just dinner here with Eliza before she goes down for the night. A quiet start to the new year." The invitation surprised them both. Nathaniel's expression softened, genuine pleasure replacing his usual controlled facade. "I'd like that very much," he said simply. As he departed into the snowy evening, Madison found herself standing at the window watching his retreating figure, her emotions a complex tangle of caution and possibility. The future she'd so carefully planned, just her and Eliza against the world, was shifting to include the man she'd once loved, once lost, and now was seeing anew through the lens of shared parenthood. Was she opening herself to potential heartbreak again? Or was this evolving relationship with Nathaniel more honest, more equal than before? Something worth exploring, not just for Eliza's sake, but for her own? The answer remained uncertain as the snow continued to fall, blanketing her garden in white possibility. The new year arrived with unexpected challenges. 2 days after their quiet New Year's Eve celebration, a simple dinner where they talked easily about their hopes for Eliza's future, Nathaniel called Madison from the hospital. "My heart," he explained, his voice strained through the phone. "An episode. The doctors want to move up my surgery to next week." The fear that gripped Madison surprised her with its intensity. "How serious is it? Do you need anything?" "Not immediately life-threatening," he assured her, though the tension in his voice suggested the situation was more concerning than he was admitting. but they want to address it sooner rather than later. I'll be fine, Madison. I just wanted you to know in case you need to reach me and I'm not available. The careful phrasing, his concern for her potential needs rather than his own, spoke volumes about how he'd been working to change his self-centered patterns. Which hospital? Madison asked, already reaching for her coat. Madison, you don't need to. Which hospital, Nathaniel? She repeated firmly. An hour later, she arrived at Emory University Hospital with Eliza secured in her carrier. She found Nathaniel in a private room, looking uncharacteristically vulnerable in a hospital gown, monitors tracking his heart rhythm with steady beeps. Surprise and something deeper flickered across his face when she appeared in the doorway. You didn't have to come. I know, Madison said simply, setting Eliza's carrier on the visitor's chair. But you're her father and she should be here. And you shouldn't be alone right now. The words acknowledged a truth Madison had been gradually accepting over the past months. Whatever their complicated personal history, Nathaniel was now an essential part of Eliza's life, and by extension, hers. The fear in his eyes as he looked at their daughter broke something in Madison's carefully maintained emotional barriers. This man, who had once seemed invincible, impervious to ordinary human vulnerabilities, was facing his mortality with the new perspective of a father who might not see his child grow up. The procedure has a high success rate, he said, as if reading her thoughts. Over 95%. I'll be fine. Madison nodded, lifting Eliza from her carrier and bringing her closer to the bed. Of course you will. You're too stubborn to be anything else. A smile tugged at his lips, breaking the tension. Says the woman who rebuilt her entire life out of spite after our divorce. Not spite, Madison corrected, settling into the chair beside his bed with Eliza in her arms. Determination. There's a difference. A fine line, Nathaniel observed, reaching out to touch Eliza's tiny hand. One I hope she inherits from you. The surgery was scheduled for the following week. In the days leading up to it, Madison found herself increasingly involved in Nathaniel's preparations, reviewing medical information with him, helping organize his post-operative care, even attending the final consultation with his cardiologist. You don't have to do all this, Nathaniel said the evening before the procedure, as Madison made notes about his medication schedule. I know, she replied, not looking up from her careful documentation. But someone needs to make sure you actually follow the doctor's orders after surgery. And I suspect you'll be a terrible patient left to your own devices. My housekeeper could. Your housekeeper is 67 years old and isn't going to force you to rest when you inevitably try to dial into board meetings 2 days after open-heart surgery. Madison interrupted firmly. Besides, this affects Eliza too. Her father needs to be healthy. The acknowledgement of his importance in their daughter's life hung between them, weighted with implications neither was quite ready to articulate. The morning of the surgery, Madison arrived at the hospital with Eliza, having arranged for Olivia to come take the baby once Nathaniel went into the operating room. To her surprise, Olivia had offered without being asked. He's her father, Olivia had said simply when Madison expressed gratitude for the help. And whatever happened between you two, he's trying now. That matters. In the preoperative room, Nathaniel appeared calm, but Madison recognized the tightness around his eyes that betrayed his anxiety. He brightened when she entered with Eliza, reaching for their daughter with a tenderness that still surprised Madison sometimes. There's my girl, he murmured, cradling Eliza against his hospital gown. Come to wish Daddy luck? Madison watched as he spoke softly to the baby, memorizing her features as if afraid he might not see them again. Despite all the reassurances about the procedure's safety, the reality of what was happening, open-heart surgery with its inherent risks, hung heavily in the room. When the nurses came to take him to the operating theater, Nathaniel handed Eliza back to Madison, their fingers brushing in the exchange. Madison, he said quietly, holding her gaze, if anything happens, it won't, she interrupted firmly. But if it does, he persisted, I need you to know something. He took a deep breath. These past few months with you and Eliza have been the most meaningful of my life. Whatever happens today, thank you for giving me that gift. Before Madison could respond, the nurses were wheeling him away, leaving her standing in the empty pre-op room with Eliza warm against her chest and Nathaniel's words echoing in her mind. The hours of surgery stretched interminably. After Olivia took Eliza home, Madison paced the waiting room, alternating between furious productivity on her phone, answering work emails, checking project timelines, and complete stillness, staring unseeing at the generic hospital artwork. Why was she here? The question circled her mind as the hours passed. Nathaniel had other people in his life, business associates, friends, his executive assistant who efficiently managed every aspect of his professional existence. Yet she knew with absolute certainty that none of them were sitting in this waiting room. That when he had faced this vulnerability, this mortality, he had turned to her, and she had come, without hesitation, without calculation. What did that mean for her carefully reconstructed life? Her hard-won independence from the man who had once diminished her so thoroughly. Finally, the surgeon appeared, still in scrubs, looking tired but satisfied. "The procedure went well," he announced. "Better than expected, actually. He's in recovery now." Relief flooded through Madison with unexpected force, leaving her lightheaded. "When can I see him?" "About an hour. A nurse will come get you when he's settled in ICU." The doctor hesitated, then added, "You're listed as his medical proxy. I wasn't aware you two had reconciled." The statement caught Madison off guard. We're co-parenting, but we're not back together." The doctor nodded, clearly not convinced. "Well, whatever your relationship status, he made sure you had full decision-making authority if complications arose. That speaks to significant trust." As the doctor left, Madison sank into a chair, processing this revelation. Nathaniel, who controlled every aspect of his business empire with meticulous precision, had placed his literal life in her hands. The man who had once criticized her decision-making about household finances had entrusted her with medical decisions that could mean life or death. "People change, Madison." His words from months ago echoed in her mind. "Have changed." Perhaps, finally, she was beginning to believe him. When she was finally allowed to see Nathaniel in the ICU, Madison was struck by how vulnerable he appeared. This powerful man now connected to monitors and IVs, his usual commanding presence diminished by the clinical environment. His eyes opened when she approached the bed, relief evident in his gaze. "You're still here," he murmured, voice raspy from the breathing tube that had been removed after surgery. Madison took the chair beside his bed, her hand finding his almost instinctively. "Of course I am. Someone has to make sure you follow doctor's orders." A weak smile touched his lips. "Always the practical one." "The doctor says everything went better than expected," she informed him, keeping her tone light despite the lingering fear she'd felt during those long hours of waiting. "You should make a full recovery if you actually rest and rehabilitate properly." "Is that a challenge?" A hint of the old Nathaniel surfaced in his tired eyes. "It's a fact," Madison replied firmly. "You have a daughter who needs you healthy and whole for a very long time." The mention of Eliza sobered him. "Where is she?" "With Olivia. I'll bring her to visit tomorrow, once you're moved to a regular room." Madison squeezed his hand gently. "Right now, you need to rest." Nathaniel's fingers tightened around hers. "Madison, what I said before surgery." "We don't need to talk about that now," she interrupted, suddenly uncertain about confronting the emotion that had charged their last interaction before he was wheeled into surgery. "Yes, we do." Despite his weakened state, determination hardened his voice. "I meant it. These months with you and Eliza, seeing you as a mother, watching you rebuild your life and your business, it's changed how I see everything, including myself." Madison felt tears threatening and blinked them back. "You nearly died today, Nathaniel. This isn't the time for life-altering conversations. Nearly dying tends to clarify one's priorities," he countered, a shadow of his usual stubbornness returning. "And mine are very clear now." Before he could continue, a nurse entered to check his vitals, effectively ending the conversation. By the time she left, exhaustion had overtaken him, his eyelids drooping despite his obvious desire to continue their discussion. "Sleep," Madison instructed gently. "We'll talk tomorrow." As Nathaniel drifted off, Madison remained by his bedside, her thoughts in turmoil. The fear she'd experienced while he was in surgery had revealed feelings she wasn't sure she was ready to acknowledge. Feelings that complicated the careful boundaries she'd established since their divorce. The days that followed established a new pattern. Madison divided her time between her design firm, caring for Eliza, and visiting Nathaniel in the hospital. She brought Eliza daily, watching as the baby's presence provided motivation for her father's recovery. Nathaniel pushed himself in physical therapy, determined to regain strength quickly, but also displayed a new patience with the healing process that surprised his doctors. "Most Type A executives fight us on every restriction," his cardiologist commented to Madison during a progress consultation. "He's actually following the program exactly as prescribed. He has something to live for now," Madison replied simply, watching through the doorway as Nathaniel held Eliza, showing her the get-well cards that had accumulated on his bedside table. When he was released from the hospital after a week, the question of his post-operative care arose. His sprawling Buckhead mansion, while luxurious, presented practical challenges for someone recovering from major surgery. Multiple staircases, considerable distances between rooms, and only a part-time housekeeper who was, as Madison had pointed out, not equipped to monitor a reluctant patient. "I've made arrangements with a home healthcare service," Nathaniel told Madison the day before his discharge, clearly expecting resistance. "A nurse will stay at the house for the first 2 weeks. Madison considered the solution, then shook her head. "That's not necessary. I can't impose on you further," he protested. "You've already done more than—" "You can stay at my house," Madison interrupted, the decision crystallizing even as she spoke the words. "The guest room is on the main floor. No stairs to navigate. I'm already caring for Eliza, so coordinating your recovery care makes practical sense." Nathaniel stared at her, clearly stunned by the offer. "Madison, are you sure? That's a significant commitment." She nodded, surprising herself with her certainty. "It's what's best for Eliza. And for you. The alternative is hiring a stranger to care for you in that enormous, empty house, which seems unnecessarily complicated." What she didn't articulate was the relief she felt at the prospect of having him where she could monitor his recovery directly, where she wouldn't have to wonder if he was pushing himself too hard or ignoring medical advice when no one was watching. The arrangement was meant to last 2 weeks, just long enough for Nathaniel to regain basic independence before returning to his own home. But as January turned to February, the temporary situation evolved into something neither had anticipated. Nathaniel proved to be a surprisingly considerate houseguest, respectful of Madison's space and routines. He took on whatever tasks his recovery allowed, rocking Eliza when she fussed at night so Madison could sleep, managing the household calendar to coordinate his medical appointments with her work deadlines, even directing his housekeeping staff to maintain Madison's home while she focused on the Westmoreland project. Their professional collaboration continued despite his recovery, with Nathaniel participating in virtual meetings from Madison's dining room table while she presented their joint design concepts to clients and contractors. The arrangement created an unexpected synergy, with ideas flowing freely between them during evening discussions after Eliza was asleep. "We make a good team," Nathaniel observed one night as they reviewed architectural renderings spread across Madison's coffee table. "Better than we ever did during our marriage." Madison glanced up from the blueprints, struck by the observation's accuracy. "We were different people then." "I was different," Nathaniel corrected gently. "You were always extraordinary. I just couldn't see it through my own ego." The compliment, delivered with such straightforward sincerity, caught Madison off guard. During their marriage, Nathaniel's praise had always been conditional, tinged with suggestions for improvement. This unqualified appreciation of her abilities felt unfamiliar but undeniably warming. As February progressed, bringing with it Eliza's first Valentine's Day, Madison found the boundaries she'd so carefully maintained beginning to blur. The practical co-parenting arrangement had evolved into something more intimate, not physically but emotionally. They shared the quiet domesticity of early parenthood, bleary-eyed midnight feedings, triumphant celebrations of Eliza's small developmental milestones, inside jokes about the ridiculous children's shows that somehow ended up on Madison's television. One evening, Madison returned from a client meeting to find Nathaniel asleep on the sofa, Eliza napping peacefully on his chest, his protective hands splayed across her tiny back. The sight hit Madison with unexpected force. This powerful man, still recovering from surgery that had literally opened his heart, now emotionally opened in ways she'd never witnessed during their marriage. She stood watching them for a long moment, confronting the truth she'd been avoiding. Somewhere amid the shared responsibilities and genuine co-parenting, amid watching Nathaniel become the man he could have been years ago, she'd begun to fall in love with him again. Not the man she'd divorced, but the man he was becoming, thoughtful, vulnerable, genuinely present. The realization terrified her. She had rebuilt her life so carefully after their divorce, had found strength in independence. Letting Nathaniel back into her heart risked everything she'd worked for, everything she'd become. Yet denying the connection growing between them felt increasingly impossible as the weeks passed. The way he looked at her when she entered a room, not with the appraising assessment of their marriage, but with genuine appreciation. The casual touches that lingered slightly longer than necessary when they passed coffee cups or design samples. The late-night conversations that drifted from Eliza's future to their own past, excavating old wounds with new honesty. By March, nearly 3 months after Eliza's dramatic introduction to her father, and 6 weeks after Nathaniel's surgery, the temporary living arrangement had developed an air of permanence neither acknowledged directly. Nathaniel had recovered enough to return to his own home, yet neither raised the subject. His clothes gradually migrated from a single guest room drawer to the closet. His preferred coffee appeared in Madison's pantry. His books mingled with hers on the living room shelves. The shift in their relationship remained unspoken, existing in meaningful glances and almost touches, in the domestic rhythm they'd established that felt increasingly like a family rather than a pragmatic co-parenting arrangement. The catalyst came unexpectedly, on the anniversary of the Savannah weekend that had brought Eliza into existence. Madison had been reviewing her calendar when she realized the significance of the date, memories of that storm-swept night flooding back. The vulnerability, the connection, the brief glimpse of what might have been if they'd been different people then. She found Nathaniel in the nursery that evening, reading to Eliza from a book of fairy tales, his deep voice softening on words like forever and promise. "She's too young to understand the stories," Madison said from the doorway, smiling at the scene. Nathaniel looked up, returning her smile. "It's never too early for happy endings. Besides, I think she likes the sound of my voice." "She does," Madison agreed, entering the room fully. "She settles faster for you than for me sometimes." "Novelty factor," Nathaniel suggested, carefully placing the sleeping baby in her crib. "You're her constant. I'm still the exciting variable." Madison laughed softly. "I never thought I'd hear Nathaniel Kingston describe himself as a variable in any equation. I never thought I'd be living in a house with floral throw pillows, but here we are," he countered, his tone light but his eyes serious as they met hers. "Life has a way of surprising us." As they left the nursery together, Madison found herself acutely aware of his proximity, of the charged silence that had become increasingly familiar between them. "Do you know what today is?" she asked as they descended the stairs. Nathaniel paused, thinking. "Tuesday. It's been exactly 1 year since Savannah," Madison clarified. "Since the storm." Recognition dawned in his eyes. "Since Eliza was conceived." Madison nodded, suddenly uncertain why she'd raised the subject. "It's strange to think how much has changed in a year." "Everything has changed," Nathaniel agreed, his voice deepening. "For the better, I hope." They'd reached the living room, the space that had transformed over recent weeks from solely Madison's territory to a shared domain, evidence of Nathaniel's presence integrated with her own. His laptop beside her design books, his reading glasses on the coffee table, photos of Eliza with both her parents displayed on the mantel. "I never expected this," Madison admitted, gesturing vaguely to encompass not just the physical evidence of their cohabitation, but the emotional reality it represented. "Any of it." "Neither did I," Nathaniel moved closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. But Madison, I've never been more grateful for the unexpected. The directness in his gaze made her breath catch. This was the moment when one of them typically would break eye contact, change the subject, retreat to safer emotional ground. This time, neither did. Nathaniel, Madison began, his name a question and answer both. What are we doing? I think, he said carefully, reaching to take her hand. We're finding our way back to each other, but differently this time. Better. The simple touch of his fingers against hers sent warmth spiraling through her. How long had it been since they'd touched like this, with intent rather than incidental contact? I'm afraid, she admitted, the confession costing her pride but necessary for honesty. Not of you exactly, but of losing myself again, of forgetting who I've become. Nathaniel's fingers tightened around hers. The woman you've become is exactly who I'm falling in love with, Madison. Not the woman I tried to make you be during our marriage, but this incredible, strong, talented person who rebuilt herself despite my best efforts to convince her she couldn't. The words, so different from anything he would have said during their marriage, broke something open in Madison's chest. A dam of caution and fear that had protected her heart for years. I don't want to go backward, she said softly. I can't. Forward, then, Nathaniel suggested, his free hand coming up to touch her cheek with reverent gentleness. Together, building something new, not trying to recreate what was broken. The sincerity in his voice, in his eyes, melted the last of Madison's resistance. She leaned into his touch, her heart racing with a mixture of hope and lingering fear. I'm still going to run my company, she warned. I won't give that up again. A smile touched Nathaniel's lips. I would never ask you to. Your success is one of the many things I admire about you, and I won't tolerate being diminished or controlled, even subtly. I'm counting on you to call me out if old habits resurface, he promised. I'm still learning, Madison, still growing, but I want to be the man you and Eliza deserve. The vulnerability in that admission, so contrary to the invincible image he'd maintained throughout their marriage, was what finally convinced Madison that his transformation was genuine. The Nathaniel Kingston she had divorced would never have acknowledged imperfection or ongoing growth. I think, she said carefully, that you already are becoming that man. The kiss that followed was different from any they had shared before, during their marriage, during that stormy night in Savannah, during all the years they had known each other. It held both memory and discovery, familiarity and newness, the acknowledgement of past wounds alongside the promise of future healing. When they separated, Nathaniel rested his forehead against hers, his breath warm against her lips. Move in with me, Madison whispered, surprising herself with the invitation. Not as a guest recovering from surgery, not as Eliza's father staying close to his daughter, but as what? Nathaniel prompted gently when she hesitated. Madison took a deep breath, stepping into vulnerability with courage born from the strength she'd built since their divorce. As my partner, in every sense. The joy that transformed his face was answer enough, but his words confirmed it. Yes, absolutely yes. As spring bloomed across Atlanta, bringing vibrant color to Madison's garden and warming the historic district with golden sunshine, their renewed relationship deepened in ways neither had anticipated. They moved deliberately, both wary of repeating past mistakes, both determined to build something stronger on the foundation of who they had become individually. The Westmoreland project flourished under their collaborative leadership, Madison's design vision perfectly complemented by Nathaniel's business acumen. Rather than competing, they elevated each other's strengths in ways that surprised their respective teams and delighted their clients. At home, they established new patterns, equal parenting responsibilities, shared household management, regular design nights, when Madison's creativity flowed freely throughout the house without Nathaniel's former attempts to contain it within acceptable parameters. Most significantly, they really talked about everything from their fears to their ambitions, from Eliza's future to their own past mistakes. Nathaniel continued therapy, sometimes inviting Madison to join sessions where they explored the dynamics that had undermined their first attempt at marriage. I never felt secure enough to be vulnerable with you before, Nathaniel admitted during one such session. I believed showing any weakness would make me lose your respect, when in reality, it was my inability to be authentic that eventually lost your love. It was during Eliza's christening in May, a small, intimate ceremony with only family present, that Nathaniel surprised Madison with an unexpected question. They stood in the church garden afterward, watching as Olivia and her husband cooed over Eliza in her elaborate christening gown. The spring sunlight dappled through ancient oak trees, casting a golden glow over the peaceful scene. I've been thinking, Nathaniel said quietly, his hand finding Madison's in a gesture that had become natural again. About us. About family. Madison looked up at him, noting the seriousness in his expression. What about us? When we married the first time, it was all about appearance. The society wedding, the perfect couple, the merger of our public personas. He turned to face her fully. If we were to marry again, and I emphasize if, what would you want it to look like? The question caught Madison completely off guard. They had been rebuilding their relationship for months now, had created a functioning family unit with Eliza at its center. But marriage had remained an unspoken possibility, too weighted with past failure to approach directly. Are you proposing? She asked cautiously. Or is this a theoretical discussion? Nathaniel smiled, reaching into his pocket. It was meant to be theoretical to test the waters. But now that we're here, he withdrew a small velvet box, opening it to reveal a ring unlike anything he would have chosen during their first relationship. Not the ostentatious diamond that had once graced her finger, but a unique vintage piece with a deep blue sapphire surrounded by small diamonds in an intricate setting. Madison Reed, he said, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes. I'm not asking you to resume our old marriage. That relationship died for good reasons. I'm asking if you would consider building a new marriage with me, one based on who we've become, not who we were. One that honors your independence and my growth, that puts Eliza's happiness and our mutual respect at its center. Madison stared at the ring, her heart racing. This wasn't the calculated business proposal their first engagement had been. This was something entirely different. Honest, vulnerable, grounded in reality rather than fantasy. If it's too soon, Nathaniel began when she didn't immediately respond. It's not that, Madison interrupted, finding her voice. I'm just surprised. I didn't think you'd want to risk marriage again after everything we've been through. The only real risk would be letting fear keep us from building the family Eliza deserves, he replied. The family we both deserve, if we're brave enough to try again. Madison looked across the garden to where Eliza was being gently bounced in her Aunt Olivia's arms, sunlight catching on her dark curls. Nathaniel's hair, Madison's smile already evident in her tiny features. Their daughter, created in a moment of reconnection, now the center around which their lives revolved. Yes, she said simply, returning her gaze to Nathaniel's hopeful face. But on one condition. Name it, he responded without hesitation. We write our own vows this time. Real ones, not the society-approved script we used before. Nathaniel's smile deepened as he slipped the ring onto her finger. I've already started drafting mine. They begin with I promise to remember that your strength is not a challenge to mine, but the foundation upon which we both stand. Tears pricked Madison's eyes at the perfect encapsulation of what had gone wrong before and what was different now. She rose on tiptoe to kiss him, a promise and a new beginning. Their second wedding, held in Madison's garden as summer bloomed around them, bore little resemblance to their first lavish ceremony. No society photographers, no strategic guest list of business connections, no performative displays of wealth. Instead, they gathered only those who truly mattered, family who had supported them through difficult times, friends who had witnessed their growth separately and together, colleagues who had become genuine connections rather than useful contacts. Eliza, now 6 months old and able to sit up on her own, served as both flower girl and ring bearer, carried down the garden path by her adoring Aunt Olivia. Madison wore not a designer gown but a simple dress in soft blue that matched the sapphire on her finger. Nathaniel forgoed his usual power suit for linen pants and a light shirt that spoke of relaxed confidence rather than constructed authority. Their vows, spoken beneath an arch of summer roses, acknowledged both past failures and future promises. I vow to see you, truly see you, in all your complexity and brilliance, Nathaniel promised, his voice steady but his eyes revealing the depth of his emotion. To celebrate your successes as enthusiastically as my own. To remember that love isn't possession but freedom, that partnership doesn't mean sameness but complementary strength. Madison, holding his hands as butterflies danced among the garden blooms, offered her own truth. I vow to bring my whole self to this marriage, not a diminished version shaped by fear or expectation. To speak my truth even when it's difficult. To remember that vulnerability isn't weakness but the courage to be fully known. To build with you a home where Eliza learns that love should always make you more yourself, never less. As the simple gold bands were exchanged, Madison having insisted on symbols less ostentatious than their first platinum and diamond wedding set, Nathaniel added one unscripted promise. And I vow to remember, every day, that this second chance is the greatest gift I've ever received, one I'll never take for granted. The reception that followed, held in the same garden as twilight softened the summer heat, felt more like a family gathering than a formal celebration. Tables scattered beneath string lights, children including Eliza passed from lap to lap, conversation and laughter flowing as naturally as the champagne. Madison found herself watching Nathaniel throughout the evening, struck by the transformation evident in how he moved through the gathering. Where once he would have worked the room strategically, mentally cataloging useful connections, now he engaged genuinely with each person. Listening intently to Olivia's husband describe his latest woodworking project, getting down on the grass to help Madison's nephew retrieve a lost toy, laughing unreservedly at stories shared by friends who had known them through their worst times. Later, as the party continued around them, Madison and Nathaniel slipped away to check on Eliza, who had finally succumbed to sleep in a portable crib set up in Madison's home office. They stood together in the doorway, watching their daughter's peaceful breathing. 1 year ago today, Nathaniel whispered, careful not to wake the baby. I stormed into your house convinced you were hiding a man from me. Madison smiled at the memory that once would have been painful but now seemed like the necessary beginning of their journey back to each other. Instead, I was hiding a baby from you. The best secret anyone's ever kept from me, he acknowledged, slipping his arm around her waist. Though I'm glad we don't have secrets between us anymore. Madison leaned into his embrace, feeling the solid strength of the man who had once seemed so emotionally unreachable now fully present beside her. Who would have thought that day would lead to this? That your arrogant accusations would somehow end with us remarried, raising our daughter together. Not me, Nathaniel admitted. I was too blinded by my own ego to see the possibility. But some part of me must have known what I was really looking for when I showed up at your door that morning. And what was that? Madison asked, turning in his arms to face him. Home, he said simply. Not a house or property, but the feeling I only ever found with you, even when I didn't know how to honor it properly. The word resonated through Madison's chest. Home, what they had created together this second time. Not the showcase their first shared house had been, designed to impress others, but a genuine sanctuary where both could be fully themselves. A burst of laughter from the garden reminded them of the celebration continuing outside. Madison took Nathaniel's hand, the new wedding band still unfamiliar against her fingers. We should get back to our guests. In a minute, he said, drawing her closer. I just want to remember this moment. The three of us, our family, our new beginning. As they rejoined their celebration under the summer stars, Madison reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. From the controlling husband and diminished wife they had once been, through the painful separation that had allowed them both to grow, to the shocking reunion catalyzed by their daughter's birth. It hadn't been an easy path, nor a straight one. But standing beside the man Nathaniel had become, watching him interact with the people she loved, Madison felt certainty settle in her heart. Some journeys weren't meant to be completed alone. Some storms came not to destroy but to clear away what wasn't meant to last. making space for something stronger to grow in its place. And sometimes, the person who once broke your heart could be the very one to help you build a life more beautiful than you had imagined possible. If you both were brave enough to try again, wiser for the breaking. If this story of finding strength and redemption touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe for more timeless love tales with Mr. Harrison. What story would you like to hear next?